And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is March the 10th, the 69th day of the year. Just 296 days remain to the year's over with, and we'll start a new one. Holidays and observances. National Mario Day. Join the iconic Italian plumber on his adventures through a fantastic world, battling fierce enemies and saving the princess. Harriet Tubman Day. Histotechnology Professionals Day. International Day of Awesomeness. Rocking life with a confident attitude, spreading positivity, making everyday situations shine. That's the essence of pure awesomeness. International Bagpipe Day. That distinctive sound that's both stirring and traditional, often heard at celebrations and gatherings, adding unique musical flavor to the atmosphere. International Day of Women Judges. National Organize Your Home Office Day. National Women and Girls HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. Salvation Army Day. National Ranch Day. Add a punch of flavor to everything from wings to veggies. Perfect for dipping and drizzling and even drinking if you're brave enough. National Sending Day. National Landline Telephone Day. National Skirt Day. International Wig Day. Festival of Life and Cracks Day. National Blueberry Popover Day. National Peel Day. Paper Money Day. National Pack Your Lunch Day. Adelaide Fringe. National Groundwater Awareness Week. Brain Awareness Week. Understanding the intricate dance of neurons and synapses unravels the mysteries of cognition, revealing the brain's brilliance. Pi Week. Pi is 3.14159. Make Mine Chocolate. World Glaucoma Day. Sleep Awareness Week. Girl Scout Week. Universal Women's Week. Campfire USA Birthday Week. Healthcare HR Week. National Bubblegum Week. Catholic Sisters Week. Patient Safety Awareness Week. National Science and Engineering Week. National MS Awareness Week. National Green Week. Endometriosis Awareness Week, affecting millions of women around the world. Pulmonary Rehabilitation Week. National Aardvark Week. And the Muslim Holy Month Ramadan. Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset, focusing on spiritual reflection and community. And that's going to go on through March the 19th. Famous people born on this date: Olivia Wilde, Chuck Norris, John Hamm, Sharon Stone, and Carrie Underwood. Well, let's see what stories we have in the news, because there's always something strange and unusual going on. President Trump issues an ultimatum if Iran closes the critical Strait of Hormuz to oil tankers. He's done playing. He's not happy with Iran's choice of Mojtaba Khomeini as its new supreme leader. And he warns Iran faces strikes 20 times harder if the Strait of Hormuz oil flow is blocked. In a post shared on True Social, he also said he prayed it would never happen. If Iran does anything that stops the flow of oil within the Strait of Hormuz, they'll be hit by the United States of America 20 times harder than they've been hit so far. Additionally, we'll take out easily destroyable targets to make it virtually impossible for Iran to ever be built back as a nation. Now, this is a gift from the United States of America to China and all those nations that heavily use the Hormuz Strait. DHS shut down has forced airports to tell travelers to arrive 4 hours early amid massive delays. I hope Schumer and his cronies are happy with all the confusion they've caused. Now, as the lapse of funding in the Department of Homeland Security continues, TSA agents have been grappling with partial paychecks and soon-to-be empty paychecks if the shutdown continues. These days, the shutdown is causing massive delays in some airports across the country. Wait times for travelers of 3.5 hours reported at major hubs due to officer shortages. TSA website and app paused operations February 17th. The site was not going to be updated until after funding is enacted, according to TSA's what TSA said on its site. Leaving travelers high and dry when it comes to finding out wait time information. TSA spokesman told Fox News on Monday that staff managing the website and the app have been furloughed. Some individual airports track security line wait time, so we'd point them in that direction, according to the spokesperson. Well, Bill Maher confronts his liberal guest after he blamed the HBO host for humanizing Trump. Maher stood his ground during a podcast released yesterday, telling his guest, Sam Harris, to get a reality check after criticizing his dinner with President Trump. After years of criticizing him and his policies, Maher made headlines when he accepted Trump's invitation to a private dinner at the White House last year. Maher praised Trump for his friendly reception and hosting that night. He rebuked his fans and fellow celebrities alike for criticizing him for accepting the invitation. Harris is a prominent atheist and liberal broadcaster. Challenged Maher about the dinner, saying he was frustrated by podcast bros and those who've done irresponsible interviews that helped normalize Trump before he won the 2024 election. Harris has also criticized Maher directly on his own podcast last April, the same month the actual dinner with Trump took place. Well, I've known the man since 1992. We lived in Trump Tower for 2 or 3 years, and I met him when I first moved in. Very personable individual, in my humble opinion. At least 40% of California teachers plan to quit in the next decade, according to a survey. Nearly half of California teachers plan to retire or quit in the next 10 years, according to this survey. In California, the share of teachers who say they plan to retire in the next 10 years is between 40 and 49%, with an estimate of 45%, according to Holly Kurtz, director of the Education Week Research Center. She added that the state teachers are, on average, older than teachers in many other states, according to most recent federal data that's available. The average age of a California teacher is 45.5, while the average teacher age in the U.S. is 42.9. That means that age likely is a major reason why California teachers are more likely to say they plan to retire in the next decade. That's more so than teachers in other states. Well, cannabis compounds could reverse disease affecting 1/3 of adults. Yes, get high and be happy. Compounds found in cannabis could provide a new roadmap for treating the world's most common chronic liver disorder, according to a new study released by the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. The research published in the British Journal of Pharmacology found that cannabidiol, or CBD, and cannabigerol, CBG, significantly reduced liver fat and improved metabolic health in experimental models. At the same time, it can keep you higher than a kite laying in the middle of the floor. Well, Conan O'Brien, the late night shows were in trouble after a viral Hot Ones appearance. Comedian Conan O'Brien realized the late night shows were in deep trouble after his viral appearance on the popular online show Hot Ones. In a recent interview with the Hollywood Reporter, former late night host weighed in on the cancellation of the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, as well as the brief pulling of Jimmy Kimmel Live, following comments made after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. O'Brien appeared in 2024 on Hot Ones, a show on YouTube with celebrities answering questions while eating chicken wings, and increasingly gets spicier. His appearance on the show has received more than 15 million views. Well, there we go. My screen just went black. Well, the wife of a teacher killed in a senior prank makes an unexpected request for the students that were charged. Wife of a Georgia high school teacher who died after what authorities describe as a late-night senior prank gone wrong has asked for all charges to be dropped against the students involved. 5 North Hall High students, were arrested after going to math teacher Jason Hughes' Gainesville home armed with toilet paper to carry out a long-standing prank tradition. Hughes, who was 40, was the intended target. Thursday night, as the gang tried to leave in 2 separate vehicles, Hughes was walking toward the street when he tripped and fell into the slippery roadway, according to the Hall County Sheriff's Office. He was then run over by a car driven by 18-year-old Jaden Ryan Wallace. Rather than an angry confrontation, the father of 2 was excited and waiting to catch him in the act, his wife Laura told the New York Times. This is a terrible tragedy, and our family is determined to prevent a separate tragedy from occurring, ruining the lives of these students, she said. This would be a counter to Jason's lifelong dedication to investing in the lives of these children. The Hugheses were both teachers at the public school and devoted their lives to teaching. According to the New York Times, the prank had evolved into an ongoing battle where students lost points if the teacher caught them in the act. So they weren't paying attention, they were just running. Well, all eyes are on Georgia as the Trump-backed candidate battles in high-stakes congressional showdown. It's primary days in Republican-dominated Mississippi, where House and Senate nomination contests are being held in a deep South state. But a special congressional election is 200 miles to the east in battleground Georgia is going to be used to fill a vacant GOP-held congressional seat. It's going to grab a lot more national attention today. Races to fill the seat in Georgia's solidly red 14th congressional district in the southwest part of the state is left vacant when MAGA firebrand Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene stepped down at the beginning of January. Greene quit Congress with a year left in her term after a very public falling out with President Trump. And the special election is being held as Republicans cling to a razor-thin 218 to 214 majority in the House. GOP can't afford any surprises and allow the Democrats to pull an upset in the special election in a district Trump carried by a whopping 37 points in his 2024 presidential victory. Well, we'll see what happens there. President Trump says he's not happy with Iran's choice of a new supreme leader. Early results from Operation Epic Fury has been way beyond expectation. Mojtaba Khomeini, the son of the late Ayatollah Ali Khomeini, was installed as the next supreme leader. Trump said he doesn't believe he can live in peace, interviewed Fox News chief foreign correspondent. We'll see if this new supreme leader wants to continue to fight or try to live in peace. Well, the House GOP fears primary losers could jeopardize razor-thin majorities. Some House Republicans are getting worried over the prospect of colleagues quiet quitting after losing their primary races as the election season heats up, threatening to whittle down the GOP's already perilously slim majority. House Republicans will likely only be able to lose 2 votes on any party line measure after a special election in a deep red Georgia district this week. Some told Fox News they're worried that their colleagues could begin missing key votes before the end of the terms if their ambitions for higher office don't go as planned. According to one House Republican, it's a real problem. He was granted anonymity to speak candidly. Told Fox News It's one of them going to be gone for his runoff. Will another not come back at all because he's mad? Is another one not going to come back because he lost? Well, only time will tell, but it could be a definite problem for the GOP. Well, the Republican says Muslims don't belong in American society, and that draws fierce Democratic backlash. According to the Democrats, if you're from someplace else, you've got more right to be here than people who are born in this country. Republican Representative Andy Ogles of Tennessee declared in a post on X that Muslims don't belong in American society, and later defended his remarks as the Democrats condemned them. He also wrote in his controversial post that pluralism is a lie. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, slammed the GOP lawmaker. Andy Ogles is a malignant clown and pathological liar, has fabricated his whole life story. Disgusting Islamophobes like you don't belong in Congress or in civilized society. That's why House Democrats will defeat you in November, Jeffrey said. Well, according to Jesse Waters, Iranians are running out of cards. Their entire infrastructure has been pretty much destroyed. And what could have been an eye toward a peaceful solution was pretty much shot in the head with the appointment of the new Supreme Leader. Well, Savannah Guthrie spotted New York City as search for her missing mother enters its 6 weeks. There's been few answers thus far. Stories out of Tucson. Today, co-host Savannah Guthrie is back in New York as a search for her missing mother entered its 6th week with a little publicity, a little publicly known progress in her hometown of Tucson. Guthrie was photographed in public for the first time since her mother's suspected abduction, alongside husband Mike Feldman and her young son in the Big Apple on Sunday. Days after an emotional reunion with her NBC colleagues and more than a month after her 84-year-old mother Nancy was last seen. If she needed that medication every day, well, she may have already crossed over to the Great Divide. Blue state governors moved to keep the heat on Kristi Noem as DHS fires back. Two Democratic sanctuary state governors signaled they won't let Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem quietly shift into a new diplomatic role after a year of turbulent immigration enforcement operations in their states. President Trump announced his intention to replace Noem with Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican of Oklahoma, and transition her into a new role as special envoy for the Shield of the Americas, becoming part of a coalition of Latin American countries. The president announced Saturday will collaborate on drug cartel crime interactions. Yeah, she's made her a lot of enemies in her job running Homeland Security. Well, a Cowboy star and his fiancée have notified guests of wedding cancellation. Dallas Cowboy quarterback Dak Prescott and his former fiancée Sarah Jane Ramos sent a note to wedding guests notifying them of the cancellation of the wedding. TMZ Sports first reported an email that was sent out to guests a month before the wedding was set to take place. They apparently called it off over the weekend. As many of you know, our wedding is currently scheduled to take place in Lake Como, Italy on Friday, April 10th, 2026. So with heavy hearts, we've made a very difficult decision to cancel our wedding. We deeply apologize for any inconvenience this may cause you, and we welcome your prayers. The email, of course, did not give a reason for the cancellation of the wedding. Prescott and Ramos' relationship had been rocky in the weeks leading up to the breakup, and things exploded between the two at their joint bachelor and bachelorette parties, according to TMZ Sports. Well, new study has shown 16 smart sleep upgrades for better rest, from plush pillows to breathable sheets. A good night's sleep starts with the right mattress. That's just the beginning. Real recipe for restful sleep also includes a few more key ingredients like cooling blankets and blackout mask and soft pillows and white noise machines. There's been a list of the best sleep essentials put together to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and wake up feeling rested. The best mattress is said to be the Sattva Classic. It's 14% off right now, from the normal price of $2,179 to $1,879. There's few things worse than waking up with an achy back. I can definitely testify to that. Then there's another mattress known as the NOLA Evolution Mattress. It's got 30% off the current price. Original price is $2,277. It's only $1,594. And I can remember in my younger days, if I just had a place to lay down, I was happy. Now we got special mattresses and special pillows. Well, the Pittsburgh bookstore is handing out free anti-ice whistles. Owner says she's not worried about losing followers. Business owner in Pittsburgh is saying she's not worried about her anti-U.S. immigration and customs enforcement social media posts that could cost her customers. She's more concerned about her anti-ice advocacy than anything else. Lizzie McCoy, who owns a Blythe Books in Brentwood, told Pittsburgh public source she's posted a warning about ICE being present throughout her Blythe Books Instagram page. Please check in on any neighbors you have who might not be able to leave their homes in these conditions. You're always welcome to tag our store, and we'll do our best to spread any sightings we see. Well, if they're not happy with the way the country's running, I can only say there's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. Schools boost anti-Semitism grades in the ADL report, but students say hostility persists. The Anti-Defamation League released its 2026 Campus Anti-Semitism Report Card, revealing a discrepancy between the university's improved policies and students' experience with anti-Jewish hate. The report card assessed 150 colleges and universities using 32 criteria that fell into three categories: administrative policies, Jewish life on campus, and campus conduct and climate concerns. The number of colleges and universities receiving A's and B's on the report cards more than doubled since 2024, going from 23.5% to 58%. Additionally, the Anti-Defamation League noted that grades of 47% of the 135 schools assessed in 2025 improved in 2026. The grade distribution among the colleges and universities, including 23 A's and 64 B's and 53 C's, 6 D's, and 4 F's. Well, I've got 5 degrees, and none of those universities did I see anything I would call anti-Semitism. Well, on that note, we're going to go to our topic for today. We're still talking about hidden government programs, and boy, there's a lot of them. More than I thought there were when I started doing this particular segment. Well, we're talking about a place that I spent a little bit of time in, Mena, Arkansas. It actually became almost a CIA town. Now, the town is 1986. Has been described as picturesque. People are polite but wary. If you know anything at all about Arkansas, it can be quite a clannish state. And there's been a lot of talk about some of the things that went on there. Freelance journalist Sally Denton said she didn't go looking for Mena, but she got so many reports sent to her that she felt she had to look into it. Big shot in town, and the days she was in and out of there, was a man named Barry Seal, who was a pilot, did a lot of flying, as he said, both north and south. And he's rolling in money. Once tipped a kid $100 for washing his windshield. Well, you may ask yourself why Seal wasn't arrested if everybody knew what he was doing. He was arrested in 1984, but the case collapsed. Charges were dropped, witnesses vanished, even a judge wasn't very happy with the case. And the judge was actually killed 2 weeks later, gunned down outside a halfway house in Baton Rouge. According to the police, it was a cartel hit. And Seal himself was killed, also allegedly by the cartel. But Sally Denton wasn't sure about that. Seal had actually been negotiating with the DEA. Turned state's evidence, don't you know? He had tapes, he had names, he had proof. Maybe somebody didn't want those things to surface. But 1987, the rumors had hardened into something like belief. It became very clear to everybody that the CIA had used Mena as a staging ground. That hundreds of weapons and drugs had been laundered through Seal and a number of others under the pretense of fighting communism. And they'd done it all behind layers of plausible deniability. Well, in 87, she came out with her first story. Then she came out with a second story, all backed up with hard, fast evidence. But the national outlets didn't run the stories. Said they were too speculative, too dangerous, too close to the bones of something they didn't want to name. Still, the calls kept coming in. Other journalists, DEA agents. One woman in Dallas claimed she saw unmarked vans crossing the airport fence line at midnight. Another man in Little Rock said he intercepted phone calls on government lines referencing Cargo Mena Black and Drop Delta Red. Well, Sally started keeping a gun in her glove compartment. Because once the pattern became clear, the next question came naturally. If they could do something like that in Mena in plain sight, what else were they doing? And who was going to disappear next? Well, the first agent to vanish was a man named Alan Stanbridge. Not officially, of course, his file at the DEA still existed. His paychecks still cleared the bank. But the man himself, his presence, his voice in the meetings, the quiet way he asked inconvenient questions was gone. He'd been reassigned, transferred, sent to a desk job in Nebraska, chasing meth labs and cornfields. No farewells, no explanation. It was a subtle, surgical extraction of the man. Inside the Arkansas office of the DEA, the mood soured. Those who'd followed the SEAL flights, who had tracked the patterns of cash and guns and wild powder spiraling through Mena, felt the ground shifting underneath them. Reports went missing. Internal memos were returned, stamped classified, access restricted, and phones clicked mid-call. There were nights when agents sat in their cars too long after leaving work, watching the shadows. One agent, who went by the name of Tommy, remembered it very vividly. He said, "You start thinking you're losing your mind because everything feels real. Trail of airplanes, those warehouses, the sudden influxes of untraceable money. Then you walk into the office and everybody's pretending it's not happening." He tried to push a case upward and it was shut down in 48 hours. Memo came from Washington. Insufficient evidence. Do not pursue. Tommy said he still had his copy. Kept it in his freezer between the venison and old tax returns. Barry Seal had been dead for over a year, shot in 1986 by Medellin cartel enforcers for allegedly for snitching. That everybody believed than just the Colombians. See, Seal had grown unpredictable. He carried tapes, he made threats. He told one associate he had a kill file, documents to be released in the event of his death. Not surprisingly, nobody could find that file. But a lot of folks said it did exist. Others said the CIA had it before he was even in the ground. And meanwhile, the story stayed quiet. Mena faded back into the trees, but beneath the surface, frustration boiled. Sally Denton wasn't alone anymore. Other journalists picked up the scent. Gary Webb in California, Daniel Hopsicker in Florida. Bits and pieces of the puzzle began appearing in local papers, in footnotes and half-buried newswire briefs. But every time somebody tried to break the story, something got in the way. A source recanted, publication backed out, a career stalled, and always in the background was the CIA, which of course denied everything. According to the CIA's position, we have no knowledge of any operations involving drug trafficking out of Mena, Arkansas. Over and over, they said the same thing, almost word for word. Well, Sally was followed once. She was sure of it. A white sedan, no plates. Lingered outside her apartment for 3 nights. She called it in to the police. Of course, nothing happened. Local police just shrugged and said probably somebody just watching the block. Well, she knew better. Inside the DEA, the casework grew tangled, I guess is the term. However, somebody tried to investigate the flow of cocaine into the Midwest. They found a trail doubling back again and again to Arkansas. Planes that should have been impounded were released. Customs logs vanished. Informants were warned off. One agent said flatly, it's like the agency is laundering its own secrets. But nobody could prove it, of course, because the rules of the game kept changing, and the referee was clearly on the take. Small team inside the IRS's Criminal Investigations Branch trying to look into financial irregularities, tried to shell companies near Mena. They were blocked. They were told it was jurisdictional overlap. National security clearance weren't met. When one of them pushed harder, he was reassigned to a tax audit unit in Buffalo. The man never spoke publicly, but he mailed Denton an envelope. No return address, no note. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Fuel invoices from 1985 showing refueling of 4 aircraft owned by Rich Mountain Aviation. All had flight plans ending in Lopango, El Salvador, near a known Contra base. That was as close to a smoking gun as she was ever going to get. But nobody would publish it. The story was radioactive. Late 1988, a young congressional staffer in D.C. named David Silverman began making quiet inquiries. He'd read Denton's work. He'd seen Webb's pieces on Nicaragua. He felt something didn't sit right. He wanted to bring it to the House Intelligence Committee. 2 months later, he found himself fired. His termination letter said he just wasn't a good fit. When Sally called to ask what happened, he said, you ever hear the sound of a door locking behind you? That's what this feels like. Well, she heard it as well. One night, her car alarm went off at 3:12 in the morning. Looked out the window and saw the driver's side door cracked open. Nothing was stolen, just a single item placed on the seat. A blank cassette tape. Didn't have any label. She didn't play it. Kept it in a safe deposit box across town. By 1989, frustration inside the DEA had turned to quiet rage. Agency was bleeding officers who had spent years trying to fight the war on drugs, only to find that the battlefield was being drawn by men they couldn't touch. One agent wrote in an internal resignation letter, I didn't sign up to chase ghosts with my own government while my own government ties my hands. The CIA is running the supply lines, and what are we doing here? We're losing. Of course, nobody responded, because by then it was clear the line between the drug trade and foreign policy wasn't just blurred, it had been erased. Well, the story finally broke publicly on a quiet Sunday in August of 1996. Front page story on the San Jose Mercury News. 3-part series by Gary Webb titled Dark Alliance. And that opening sentence, cut like a scalpel, said for the better part of a decade, the San Francisco Bay Area drug ring sold tons of cocaine to the Crips and the Blood Street gangs of Los Angeles and funneled millions in dark profits to a Latin American guerrilla army run by the CIA. Wasn't Mena, not directly, but it traced the same arc. Cocaine, Contras, American complicity. And behind it all, a whisper shaped like a warning. The government had just allowed the crack epidemic to happen. It had helped build it. Webb's reporting tore through the black community like a wildfire. Church basements filled with late-night meetings. Radio hosts screamed into microphones. Former addicts wept on live TV. Parents of the dead demanded accountability. And everywhere, from Watts to D.C., one name kept coming up time and time again. Mena. Talk shows replayed old clips of Barry Seal. Helicopter footage showed the Arkansas airstrip still active, still anonymous. Congressional aides whispered about sealed hearings, and journalists circled like sharks around every ex-CIA spook they could find. And then the pushback started. Hard. The Washington Post, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times all published editorials questioning Webb's methods, his evidence, his conclusions. Officials from the DEA and the FBI and the CIA issued carefully worded denials. They said no evidence has been found to substantiate claims of CIA involvement in the domestic drug trade, according to one statement. It didn't matter the evidence had been systematically destroyed or buried. Webb was discredited. His editors distanced themselves. He was reassigned to a suburban bureau. His career unraveled very quickly. Sally Denton watched it unfold with a sense of nausea that never left. And she had seen it before. Every time the truth came close to the surface, the hands came down fast. Not just to cover, but to crush. Still, the damage had been done. The myth had become memory. And memory had become fact. In the early 2000s, as her hearings began to reopen, former agents testified in closed session. Memos surfaced. The documents long thought lost reappeared. Partially redacted, of course, but damning in implications. 1982 memo from the CIA Inspector General, buried in a bureaucratic layer, stated that no prohibition exists on agency relationships with individuals involved in drug trafficking operations. The line was right there. There was no prohibition, no shame. In a Senate hearing in 1998, CIA Director George Tenet admitted mistakes were made, but he denied any deliberate involvement in the drug trade. Politicians nodded solemnly. Reporters scribbled half-hearted notes, but the room felt empty of the truth. Meanwhile, the numbers told their old story. By 1989, the U.S. had over 1 million crack users. Cities like Baltimore and Oakland and Detroit had become war zones. Prisons overflowed with black men sentenced under laws designed during the height of the panic. Families fractured. Generations vanished into the system. And through it all, the airstrips of Mena remained active, busy. Planes came and went. The records were cleaner now. Field logs digital. But some things never changed, of course. The place that had once served as a shadow junction for one of the darkest chapters of American intelligence now sat quietly, pretending it had never mattered. Some say Barry Seal's ghost still walks the tarmac, laughing at the sky. Others say the real ghosts are buried in file cabinets and basements of government buildings and no nameplates, inside the drawers that will never be opened. 2004, Gary Webb was found dead in his apartment. 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Immediately ruled suicide. A determined case of suicide, but still suicide. Now, I don't know how you shoot yourself twice, but he did. Internet exploded at that point. The conspiracy didn't die, it metastasized. Podcasts, documentaries, grainy YouTube clips, amateur investigators pulling on strings that led everywhere and nowhere. Mena became a legend. And legend became a shield for the truth, hard to see and harder to hold and easy to mock, but the facts did remain. Barry Seal flew planes filled with cocaine into the U.S., and those planes landed in Arkansas. The money from those drugs funded a war the American people never agreed to. The agency sworn to protect the nation watched, enabled, or directed it, depending on which document you believe. And the lie wasn't just in what they did, it was in what they made disappear. And in silence that followed, the wreckage was real. Dead addicts, destroyed families, crumbling cities, and behind it all, the single persistent whisper that would not die. It was never about drugs. Oh, no. It was about control. And that's what the faceless people in the shadows were after. Well, turning from Mena, how many people know there was actually a coup attempt during World War II against FDR? It was known as the business plot. They asked a war hero to topple democracy, and he almost listened. It started in whispers. It's always in whispers. The kind known to drift through hotel lobbies after midnight behind cigar smoke and crystal tumblers and carried on the breath of men who don't believe in accidents. New York City and Philadelphia, in rooms paneled to walnut lit by oil paintings of dead magnates, the great industrial families were afraid. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, had been elected in a landslide. The new president spoke like nobody they trusted. He talked about redistribution, about banking reform, about labor rights, words that made men in pinstripe suits reach instinctively for their checkbooks. The world was spinning much too fast for their liking. Europe had gone mad. Germany with its brown shirts, Italy with its black ones, and Washington smelled like upheaval. They began to ask, what if America went the same way? What if the Republic slipped from their hands? So the clandestine meetings began. It was never called treason. It was called patriotism or stability, or an emergency measure to restore order. That's my favorite one. They wrapped it in language and made betrayal feel like responsibility. What they needed was, in fact, what they lacked was a soldier, not a bureaucrat, not a politician, but a man the public actually loved, somebody they could happily get behind. A man like Smedley Darlington Butler. By anybody's measure, he was a war hero. Retired Marine Corps Major General, twice decorated with the Medal of Honor. Battlefield commander who's in action in Haiti and China, Nicaragua, and France. He walked with the tired shoulders of a man who had carried too much for too long and spoke with the rough honesty of somebody who didn't care to climb anymore. 1933, he was living in Newtown Square, Pennsylvania. Semi-retired, giving speeches to veterans groups and unions, railing against fascism and the banking elite. And quite frankly, that's what made him useful. And dangerous, of course. The first approach was from a man named Gerald McGuire, a smooth-talking bond salesman that represented the American Legion. At least he said he was. He arrived at Butler's modest farmhouse in July, polite, firm-handed, speaking in the tone of somebody trying not to sound rehearsed. He said, "We think you're the man." Butler said, "For what?" "To lead, to restore direction, a strong figure. The country's in chaos." Butler leaned back in his chair, and he'd heard that rhetoric before. In Haiti, where businessmen backed militias, in Nicaragua, where puppet governments wore American medals. He didn't like it then, didn't like it now. But McGuire kept coming back. Over the weeks, the visits turned into propositions. He talked about a citizen army, 500,000 strong, veterans trained and loyal. He spoke of wealthy backers, DuPont and J.P. Morgan affiliates, and Remington and big names whispered like incantations. He hinted at foreign models, especially Mussolini's Italy. What was happening there, he said, could be a blueprint for America. Corporate order, national unity, the end of unrest. Butler listened. Didn't say much, but he started taking notes. McGuire was careful with language, but clumsy with confidence. He left behind slips, details, phrases, even documents, and once mentioned a $300,000 fund to get things started. In 1933, that was a hell of a lot of money. Another time, he waved a pack of letters from prominent businessmen. He said, "You'll have backing, real backing." Butler pretended to entertain the idea. He asked questions. He nodded, but something hardened in his eyes. He had served this country too long to watch it be bought by bankers. But to find out all he could, he played along. In November, McGuire invited him to a meeting in a Manhattan suite. The room was lush. Persian rugs, brass lamps, bourbon and crystal decanters. Two of the men were present. Both were quiet, both watching. They wanted Butler to lead a movement of veterans to march on Washington, not to overthrow Roosevelt directly. Oh, no. To persuade him to create a new cabinet position. It'd be called Secretary of General Affairs. Somebody with full executive power, somebody like Butler. According to McGuire, you'd be kind of a super president. FDR would still be there, but you'd guide him, so to speak. Butler didn't say anything. He let the silence stretch. One of the men finally added, "You wouldn't be alone. This is bigger than politics. It's about saving America." Butler looked at the bourbon, untouched in front of him, thought about the men he'd buried in France, the burning eyes of peasants in China, the bullet-split skulls in Haiti, and now these men wanted him to turn those ghosts against his own country. Well, at that point, he stood up slowly and said, "I'll think about it." But he already knew. He wasn't going to lead this army. He was going to expose it. Well, the rain came down hard the night Butler made that decision. The kind of cold November storm that flattens leaves and makes a man feel older than his bones admit. He sat alone at his writing desk, a stack of index cards in front of him, each scribbled with the fragments of the past few months, names and amounts and snippets of conversation, expressions that had lingered just a moment too long. He didn't need the notes to remember. It's all carved into him now. But he wanted the trail clear. This wasn't paranoia by any means. This was a plot. He reached out to a reporter first. Paul Comley French, a young correspondent with a sharp mind and a sharper sense of political smell. French was skeptical at first. He found it hard to believe that they were talking about a coup in America. Ludicrous. Treason by the upper class, absurd. Butler was calm, measured. He laid out the pattern brick by brick until even French couldn't deny the shape of it. According to what Butler said, they told him he'd be the man on the white horse. They wanted a leader the people would follow, a soldier, not a politician. Somebody who could give the orders and make it look clean. Well, French sat for a long time and then finally looked at Butler and said, "You need to take this higher." And Butler did. November 20th, 1934, he testified before a special committee of the House of Representatives, the McCormick-Dickstein Committee, charged with investigating un-American activities. The room was modest, windowless. It had the smell of old books and tobacco. Congressmen shuffled papers and glanced at one another as Butler took his seat. Some of them had already heard the rumors, not expecting what came next. He didn't hold back. Oh, no. He named names, dates, times, places. He described meetings, tone, strategy, money, painted a picture not of some drunken fantasy, but of a cold, deliberate effort by wealthy industrialists to install a fascist shadow government under the pretext of national stability. He brought French in to corroborate parts of the story. Details lined up. The trail was unbroken. Butler told these congressmen, "This is not hearsay. This is not theory. I was approached. They were serious." Well, the committee, of course, was stunned. Behind closed doors, their expression shifted from disbelief to discomfort into something close to fear. Because if what Butler said was true, it meant that some of the most powerful men in America had planned to dismantle democracy. Quietly, elegantly, without firing a shot. The press got wind of it very quickly. Headlines flared. Butler says a plot laid to seize government by force. Editorials ran the gamut from dismissing it as nonsense to screaming that America just barely avoided a dictatorship. New York Times ran a careful, cautious piece. Philadelphia Record printed Butler's full testimony on page 1. But then something strange happened. Absolutely nothing. The committee issued a report that confirmed parts of Butler's story. They acknowledged that certain businessmen had discussed forming a paramilitary force. Money actually did change hands. There were real attempts to enlist Butler, but no charges were filed, no subpoenas were issued. The names of the plotters, some of them were omitted from the final report. The most damning elements were buried in footnotes, sealed in appendices, and sanitized for public digestion. It was as if the weight of what had almost happened was too heavy to carry. Paul Comley French later described the silence that followed as the loudest hush he'd ever heard. Butler, for his part, was unfazed. Went back to a circuit of speeches, louder now, more defiant. Called out Wall Street, the arms dealers, the fascists abroad and home. He quoted scripture, Lenin, Jefferson. He said that war was a racket and so was power. It stared into the heart of American oligarchy and refused to blink. And that made him dangerous and irrelevant. Public lost interest. No arrests were made, of course. No hearings were convened. The storm had passed, but Butler kept speaking. In smoky union halls and dusty auditoriums, he told the story over and over about the day they came to him, about how easy it could have been, about how they came to rewriting the Constitution with a handshake, a bank transfer. He once said fascism would come to America wrapped in the flag and carrying a cross. The audience always went silent at that point. The final report from the McCormick-Dickstein committee was released quietly, folded into the churn of December 1934, while the country prepared for another grim winter. No press conference, no high-profile hearings, just a few typed pages buried in congressional records. The conclusion was damning in tone, but toothless in consequences. The committee did find that individuals connected to powerful business interests had discussed the creation of a fascist-style veteran army, and they had approached General Butler, and there were indications of funding and recruitment, but the report stopped short of criminal accusations. No charges, no indictments, no public naming of those at the top. It felt to many folks like a door closing, not with a bang, but with a lock. For Smedley Butler was the final confirmation that the system he'd once defended was no longer built for truth. He continued to speak, always to the working class, to the veterans, to the people still believed somebody in uniform might protect them. But the press quickly lost interest. The public moved on. The story, so explosive in its first moments, dissolved into the fog of ambiguity. Historians later debate whether the plot ever was truly real. Some claimed it was just a barroom bravado, a rich man's fantasy, idle talk that never had teeth. Others argued the opposite, that Butler had stopped something before it began. That history's failure to react was itself part of the cover-up. What is beyond dispute, though, is a retired general testified under oath that a group of American businessmen had asked him to lead a military coup against the sitting president, and the country just shrugged. The names implicated behind the scenes were never held to account. Remington, DuPont, members of the American Liberty League, quiet meetings in hotel rooms, bankers who'd supported fascists abroad, now entertaining it at home. But wealth has always been the best shield against scrutiny. So it was that the New Deal marched on. The Great Depression slowly moved toward war. And Smedley Butler faded from the headlines. He died in 1940, just 58 years old. He died of cancer. He did not live to see what came next, the rise of true fascism in Europe, the war he had warned about that was coming. The veteran shipped off again. His legacy remained fractured. Among Marines, he was remembered for bravery. Among radicals, he was remembered for defiance. Among the powerful, though, he was quietly forgotten. But the story never really vanished. Decades later, researchers unearthed a full transcript of his testimony. Journalists dug into old letters, academics found corroborating accounts, and slowly the plot began to reemerge. Not as a scandal, but as a specter, a warning. Because it had actually been so easy. A few meetings, a few $1 million, a single willing general. That was all it would have taken. The business plot never exploded, it evaporated, dissolved into polite dismissal, brushed away by a nation didn't want to believe its richest citizens could conspire against its foundations. But the idea did linger. Behind the flag, behind the marble buildings and televised speeches, there were men in quiet rooms that still believed democracy was negotiable. They saw elections as inconvenience, would smile as they handed you a constitution and burn it behind your back. And sometimes, just sometimes, they find a soldier to carry the flame. This time they found Smedley Butler. And luckily for all of us, he said no. Well, our next story, we're going to be talking about And tomorrow's show is one whose name still rings through the halls of government. We're going to talk about Watergate, the White House break-in and cover-up. Well, they broke into the wrong office, frankly, but exposed the entire system. It was June 17th, 1972, just past midnight. Quarters of the Watergate office complex were still quiet. The air cooled artificially against the humid D.C. summer. From the outside, that building looked just like any other brutalist pile of concrete and glass, but on the 6th floor of the Eastern Tower, lights glowed behind the frosted glass of the Democratic National Committee headquarters. Inside that room, the smell of old coffee lingered. 5 men moved with a choreography they had rehearsed in silence, black gloves, business suits, surgical tape over fingertips. And each one had its own special assignment. One man hovered near the door, pressing a tiny transmitter to check the wire. Another crawled beneath the receptionist's desk, uncurled a cable like a spider's spinning web. In a file room, 2 men rifled through locked drawers, taking photographs with a miniature Mena camera. They worked efficiently, like men who'd done this before, because they had, frankly. One of them, a man named James McCord, former CIA, now working for the committee to re-elect the president, paused every few seconds to listen. Paranoia was part of the uniform they wore that night. He was the lookout, stationed closest to the stairwell. Also, the one carrying a walkie-talkie turned to a colleague parked in a van outside. Down below, across the street, Alfred Baldwin sat in a Howard Johnson's hotel with a pair of headphones clamped to his ears. His job was to listen to the bugs planted earlier in the DNC's phones. What he heard now wasn't strategy or secrets, it was static. And then suddenly he heard voices. Not from the wiretap, from the hallway. 2 D.C. police officers dressed in plain clothes had responded to a silent alarm triggered by a janitor who'd noticed tape on the basement door latch. It wasn't the first time something odd had happened at Watergate, but this time it stuck in his head. Why would a door be taped open late at night in a supposedly secure building? No, the story that has long been played out about the Watergate. Well, my research shows there's a lot that wasn't said. For example, out of the DNC, there was a great deal of evidence that a major call girl operation was being run, naming some of the biggest names in the DNC. We're going to talk more about that. In fact, we're looking at doing a book about that. You know, the headlines fascinate. The headlines keep your attention focused. But they don't always tell the full story. And on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk more about some of the strangest things that have gone on in this country. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.